Well, welcome to the July 19th online service of Brookhaven Church. I'm Glenn Meredith. I'm the pastor here at Brookhaven Church, and as you can see, I'm sitting in an empty auditorium. This is the third week that we have been online only because of the recent uptick in positive cases of the coronavirus in our area. And so we've been meeting online, and we're going to do that again for sure next week. And I know that many of you are sort of wondering, well, when are we going to open back up again, and when is the church going to get back together? So I hope that you will watch all the way to the end of today's service, because at the end of the service today, I want to give you a little bit more details of where we are in the process and what you can do to help us this week. And so please stay tuned. But in the meantime, I just want to remind you that even though the church family is not meeting together in worship services right now on Sunday morning, please do not make the mistake of thinking that the church is not alive and well and ministering and continuing its mission of seeking to reach the world for Jesus. And we are, in fact, doing that. Every day, our academy here, the Academy at Craig Ranch, continues to open daily, and it is doing well. I know some of you have asked me how the Academy is doing, and so we were, prior to the pandemic hitting, the Academy was running a little over 200 children a day, and so when the pandemic hit, people couldn't work, they stayed home, and so as a result of that, we got down to about 17 children a week or a day meeting with the Academy, and that's all that we could do because it was essential workers only, could put their kids in childcare. But now we're back up to a little over 60 children a day with new kids enrolling each week. And so it's progressing and making its way back. And we trust that it's going to continue to do that. But would you pray for our academy, and pray especially for the workers and the staff there, that every day they come in, that they minister to those children. It's a great outreach opportunity of our church. And so that continues on. So certainly be in prayer for them. Our small groups continue to meet online or in Zoom format, and that they keep up with each other. And our prayer teams are praying every day for our church and for the mission spreading around the world. So much is going on. One of the great things that happened this week, if you had the opportunity to view last week's service, then you heard the interview that I did with Dr. Falak Shur. Falak is a missionary pastor in the country of Pakistan. And he started visiting our church back in December, and I got to know Falak. And he's just a wonderful man of God, humble man of God. And he has started taking the sermons that I preach on Sunday, and he has started transcribing them into his native language of Urdu, and it is the fourth most spoken language in the world. And they take that, they give that message then to the 100 pastors and preachers under their ministry in Pakistan, and it is preached in over 35,000 people a week. And so our church is involved in not only seeing the message spread there, but our church every month gives $1,200 to that ministry, Huduk Ministries, and they are able to rent a tent there in one of the cities there in Pakistan, and hundreds of people gather. And just last month, they baptized over 50 people there in that ministry that you are making possible through your financial gifts. But Falak's vision, and something we wanted to come alongside of him to do, is to build a church building there in that city. And so to do that would cost a total of $72,000, and $20,000 for the land, $5,000 to register the land with the government, and another $42,000 or $47,000, I think it is, to build the building. And so I gave you a challenge last week to say, let's see if we could raise that money. Falak and his team have been working and saving for 6 years. And over the last 6 years, they have managed to save $6,000. Well, you took the challenge, and this week, through our church, we've had $25,264 have come in this week. Over $25,000 that you gave above and beyond your regular tithes and offerings, which you were generous again this week with that. Another $25,000 you gave toward the ministry there in Pakistan. That means we can buy the land already this week, something they didn't think would be possible for 10 years. You have now made possible by the grace of God in 1 week. What an amazing thing. In addition to that, our church has already got $10,000 that's setting in a designated account for mission work that we're going to take and apply to this as well. So that puts us up over $35,000. Will Falak and his team have raised $6,000, so that means there's $41,000 toward the $72,000 goal in 1 week. And so as a result of that, we need just a little over $30,000 more, and we will be able to not only buy the land, but build that building. And what that building will do is it will enable them during the day to have school for children. If you are in that country, it's like over 97% Muslim in that country. And if you are not Muslim, then your kids cannot go to school, or they have to go to an Islamic school. And so the Christians do not send many of their children, do not go to school. And so they are uneducated, and it keeps them in a cycle of poverty. You and I, by providing this money to build this building, they'll be able to have a school during the day for children ages 6 to 16. Hundreds of children and their families can begin to break out of that cycle of poverty. In addition to that, the building at night will be used as a Bible school where hundreds of pastors can come in, young ministers, and they can train them, and they can spread out over that region with the gospel of Jesus Christ, starting churches, ministering. You could have an impact in that. And then last, of course, obviously, the church would use it for services all during the week, multiple services that thousands of people could come to. So you and I can make a difference. Right now, while the church is not meeting together in person, we can still literally touch the world. So I want to ask you to give toward this church in Pakistan. And the way you can do that is that you can go to our church website. Just go to brookhavenchurch.com/give, and it will take you to a site on our website where you can donate. You will notice that there is the word in a menu there. It says General Fund. That means that when you go to the website and you give on our website, it automatically goes to our general giving, the general budget of the church. But if you click the little arrow out beside the word general, it drops a menu down that gives you designated funds you can also give to. And the second one on the list is Church in Pakistan. So this week, in addition to your regular giving, I ask that you would also consider giving a gift, whether large or small. You can make a difference that will last until Jesus comes and reach souls for Christ in one of the most dangerous places in the world. So I hope that you will join me in doing that. Well, the Bible tells us that as we get closer and closer to Christ's return, that evil men and seducers will go from bad to worse. And then Paul gives the exhortation to young Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 3. He says, "Therefore you continue in what you have learned from infancy, knowing from whom you learned it from." It is very important that as you go to a local church and as you listen to preachers and people teach and you follow the leadership of spiritual leaders, it's important that you know them. You know their way of life, and you know, is this a person that I really can look up to, that I can trust? Are they living what they are teaching? And so what I thought I would do is over the next several weeks, that we would take this opportunity to help you get to know the spiritual leaders of our church, the staff of our church. Because so many of you, you've joined the church in the last 2 years and you really haven't had the opportunity to really know the church staff very well. So I've had the privilege of being here over 38 years, but the person who has served alongside of me on our staff the longest is Chris Barker. And today in an interview, I just wanted to introduce Chris to you so you could get to know him a little bit better. Chris has been on our staff now for 25 years. So join me in an interview that I did earlier in the week with Chris Barker, who is our associate pastor, who heads up our youth ministry and also our small group ministries of our church. So I hope you're blessed by the interview with Chris. Well, welcome, Chris. I'm glad to have the opportunity to really introduce you officially, I suppose, to the church family. Of course, you've been here for many, many years now, and anybody who's been a long-time member of the church knows you well, knows a lot of your story, but as you are well aware, we've had so many people, new folks, join our church over the last couple of years. So we haven't really had the time. We've been running so fast, we haven't really had the time for people to get to know you or the rest of our staff. And so I thought this would be a great time for us to get to do this. And so thank you for joining me today and joining our church family on this Sunday morning service. And I think this will be a good time together.
So. Well, it is my pleasure to do it. Appreciate the opportunity, humbled by it. Hope I don't run anybody off as they get to know me. So
I'm sure that won't be the case.
Stay around.
Well, I think you were 23, 24 when I first met you back in 1994 is my recollection. Is that right?
It was.
93, 94?
Yep, it was 94, and I think I was 24 years old. And so Dory and I had been married for 1 year.
1 year, okay.
And so, we came in December of 94, and we joined in the spring of 95. There's a lot of big stuff going on in the church back then, actually, which we were impressed by and engaged by. And so, I have been here ever since, as hard as that is to believe.
That's hard to believe.
It is.
Now, I think were you a senior in college?
I was actually a junior then, so I graduated in the spring of 96, I guess it was. So.
Okay, so junior at Dallas Baptist University.
DBU, yeah.
And you were working on a music degree?
I was, yep.
Okay.
Bachelor of Arts in Church Music with an emphasis in vocal performance. So I was a singer.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So tell a little bit about how did you find the church? I mean, you were going out to DBU. That's wasn't close to the church. Of course, we were meeting that time at Farmers Branch, which is 20-something miles southwest of here, but it was still, 45 minutes at least to DBU.
Yeah, and actually the church was in Dallas at that point.
Okay, that's right.
On Midway Road.
That's
so
right.
That's where we were. But my first day in theory class, I met a guy named Mike Garner. And Mike was the interim worship pastor here at the time. And Mike loved to fish, I loved to fish, and so we pretty quickly became friends there. And he kept telling me about this great little church. And we actually came and visited for a little while. And then I went on staff at a little church out in Lancaster called Lancaster Park Baptist Church. And I served out there as the worship guy and then became the worship and youth guy for about a little over a year, I guess it was. And Dory and I got married in that time and felt like it was time to focus on our marriage more, and the church kind of was dividing my time, marriage and school is what we wanted to focus on. So we came back, and man, I tell you, we just thought, where has this place been? It was different the second time for some reason, not that we didn't like it the first time, but it was, where has this place been? And we'd kind of heard about the story from Mike anyway, just kept hearing about this great little church and steps of faith and all that was going on. So it was a sweet time.
It was a pretty exciting time in the church. Well, what many people, of course, probably don't remember is that we had a ministry of music from 1988 to 1992, and then in 92 he felt led to go to another church. So we went 2 years without a ministry of music, and it was during that time that Mike was our interim part of that time. And we were searching and praying, and it was kind of a difficult time in my own life, as it just seemed like we were in this waiting period and waiting mode, and God was teaching me a lot of things, and I'm sure the church as well. And so in 1994 then, we were able to hire Jerry Wilson. You remember Jerry?
I do.
And Jerry moved here from Colorado Springs to be our worship pastor, and almost 1 year to the day that he came, he felt led of God to leave and start a ministry by faith back in Colorado, and he left. But in that meantime, God had brought you and Dory into the church, and so it was a slam dunk, obvious deal to everybody that knew you that you were the guy.
Well,
and so
that's cool.
1995, then you, I think, joined our church staff.
Yep, that's right. In fact, Jerry was a big part of why we came. You and Jerry really just wanted to learn from both of you guys, and we served on the worship team with Jerry, and it wasn't long before before he left. And I remember in the interim time, you and I were eating lunch at Ball's one time, and you said, you know, I don't want to hire any more staff from outside the church. And of course, I was leading interim worship at that time. I was thinking, boy, I wonder if that means I might get a shot at it. And so, yep, sure enough.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the years you've been with us. Before we do that, I would like you to kind of back up a little bit and tell us a little bit about your upbringing, where you
Sure.
grew up and all that kind of thing.
Sure. So I grew up in League City, Texas. Same house my entire life down there. That's the halfway point between Houston and Galveston on the Gulf Freeway. So my love was saltwater fishing growing up. I miss the coast, still being in Dallas, miss that. In fact, get to go back next week and do a little bit of it. So I'm
Good.
excited about that. But grew up there. Grew up at Bay Area First Baptist Church, which is a church, thriving church that's still in existence there. And when I was about 9 years old, we had an evangelistic crusade that was there at the church by a guy named Jay Strack. And so Jay presented the gospel, and I gave my life to Christ and came forward and said I wanted to give my life to Christ then. So I kind of grew up in church. I remember my dad going to church when I was young, but then he fell out and didn't go, but always made sure that we went. And then my mom was very faithful, worked in the church, and so grew up there. The church had a private school associated with it, Bay Area Christian School, and so I went to school there. They put me in school there. And so my love, never lost the love for fishing, but it kind of shifted over to sports. Kind of my middle school years, I started playing football and organized sports. And back then, not everybody played sports from out of the womb like they do today. It's a little different. But anyway, developed a love for football and basketball. And so I grew up in what was a very nurturing church environment there. When I was 16, my family blew up, and my dad left my mom for a 6-year separation, which they were reconciled 6 years later, which rarely happens. That's a whole nother story to tell sometime. But in that time, in there, I really kind of had to decide, am I going to go to church? My mom left and went to another church, and I kind of had to decide, am I going to go to church on my own and do this thing? Is this faith going to become my own? I wasn't thinking that. I look back and see that's what was happening at the time. But man, that church, really, there were kind of three guys, Randy Ray and my father-in-law now, Wayne Williams, and Mike Hayes, that kind of became really surrogate spiritual fathers for me and kind of took me under their wing and raised me and helped me grow in the Lord. And so anyway, that's where I grew up, and a little about my story and kind of how I met the Lord.
How did you meet Dory?
Well, Dory went to that church, believe it or not. So I have known Dory since she was in the, she went to that little private school, and we were in elementary school. And then she moved to Alaska, lived in Alaska for a while, and then moved back. And we actually had, I guess, a dating relationship, you'd call it. We liked each other, put it that way, when she was in the 8th grade. And so we've known each other a really long time. So yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
It is amazing.
So,
that somebody will know you that long and still talk to you. It's just amazing.
So tell us about your family now. When you and Dory first came here, you'd been married for a year, but since that time, God's added to your family.
Yeah, He has. And yeah, so I've got a daughter that is just about to be 21, and so she's at Baylor University. She's just declared an accounting major.
Oh, really?
There.
Okay.
So yep, that's what she wants to
great.
do. And then, yep, I've got a 15-year-old son that's a sophomore, and then I've got a 13-year-old son that's also an 8th grader. They go to Grapevine Faith Christian School. Dory was at home with our kids for the first 10 years of us having children, and then when it came time to get them in school, an opportunity opened up for her at Faith, and so she's been teaching there almost 10 years. I think this will be her 10th year
Wow.
at Faith, which is hard to believe. But
Because when you were at DBU getting a music degree, she was there getting
She
education
was.
degrees.
Yep,
right? Yeah.
yep. We did not date all through high school. We dated my senior year, or up until kind of a little bit of my junior year, and then my senior year of high school, and then we broke up and just kind of went our separate ways. We remained friends for about 2.5 years, but then we got back together her senior year of high school, and I had kind of decided at that point, if I wasn't going to put her on a string and on again, off again, if I was going to date her, I was pretty convinced that she was God's person for me. She'd known that for years. I'm just a little slow. It took me a while to get around on that.
Get it before we do. Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
So you came here. You were 24 years old, and then you joined our staff in 1995
Yep.
as our worship pastor, and so music styles were a little different.
They were
back there.
They were.
Kind of tell us about what you remember about.
Well, before I get into that, let me tell you a little about how I got into kind of a call to ministry,
Okay,
if you don't
yeah,
mind.
sure.
I kind of had that experience where I gave my life to Jesus or whatever, but I don't know honestly if my faith was real or not during that time. But when my family got rocked, and I kind of had to make this choice of continuing into church, that I think God began to work in my heart in another level. And so we had a worship pastor at the time who was another guy that just had a huge influence on my life, Warren Hunt. He twisted my arm and made me try out they needed guys in the youth choir. We had youth choirs back then, and they needed guys for the youth choir tour. So he twisted my arm and made me try out, and I wound up getting this lead part in a youth choir tour. And so here I am, very marginally following Jesus at this time, and I'm up in front of people trying to lead them to deepen their relationship with Jesus. And so we had an intern that was there from Dallas Theological Seminary, was at Bay Area First Baptist that summer. And one day on the bus, he was sitting next to me and he said, "Chris, have you ever considered going into vocational ministry?" I said, "No, I felt sorry for those guys. I had no intention of doing that." But anyway, he said, "Well, God really uses you when you sing." And so that kind of started a process in my heart to begin to unfold. I went and told our pastor, I wonder if God might be calling me to ministry. And so he also took me under his wing and began to pour into me and mentor me. And over several months, kind of determined that was a call from God. And I kind of got to where I didn't want to do anything else but that. And so I started the journey of education. That was the next deal, because God called me to worship ministry, but I didn't know where middle C was on the piano when I went to middle school. And those two things don't mesh very well. So I really had some work in catching up to do.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting how in your testimony, just like mine, that when we began to serve and we began to do something, God began to grow us, began to call us, and began to develop our faith. And that's such a powerful principle of how God uses when we serve others. We start, trying to be used of God, then God begins to do a mightier work in our lives than in the lives of those we're serving oftentimes. And then it's funny how oftentimes other people tend to see God's activity in our lives sometimes before we do.
That's so true.
So godly counsel in your life, speaking into your life, that's so neat. Well, we're so thankful that God brought you here.
Me
and
too.
So you came here. The church was a little different back in 1995.
It was. Yep, so back then we all wore coats and ties. In fact, about 2 weeks ago, I got rid of my tasseled wingtip loafers because I thought I may not ever put those on again, but we wore them regularly back then. We had a choir, and we had some pretty good sized choirs back then for our little church, 45 or 50 voices we had. We were playing, did we have an organ? We'd had an organ somewhere around in there.
Yeah, an organ.
God killed the organ with lightning there, and so we considered that a mercy at the time. Actually, ironically, the girl who was playing the organs visiting our church again, Elise, then Butler, now Moore, is visiting our church again after many years. But yeah, we did that, and I used to wave my arm to lead music, and we had hymnals that we read from, and so it was
choir
it
had
was
choir robes
choir robes. Believe it or not.
Yeah,
man.
It was a huge part of the job was just keeping the music library organized and having room and pulling all that music out for choir rehearsals and getting it all put back up.
I don't miss that one
iota. I remember you in there for hours doing that kind of thing. So we began to sort of as life changed and times changed, then we began to sort of change our worship styles a little bit. Kind of walk us through some of the things you remember about that, because I just want to say our church has always been wonderful about those transitions. We've had very little problems through the years, but we've changed dramatically.
Oh, yeah.
And you led us through a great deal of that and did it wonderfully. And so kind of walk us through some of the things you remember there.
Well, God gave us some advantages, and I agree. One of the things I love about Brookhaven is, and that drew us here in the very first place, is we really seek to follow God by faith. And so we also value being true to the Scriptures. And so what that means is, sometimes a form of worship is just a cultural thing, and it's not necessarily true to the Scriptures. And so we have been pliable and willing to change over the years, and that means a lot. But God's also kind of helped us along, because every time we change an environment, we just add a new little worship piece, and all of a sudden it'd be there.
Yeah.
You know, when we moved from my last day, Jerry's parting shot when he left was to set us up, was to put a snare drum down on the front row, and we played The Lord Our Banner, I think it was, and we had a guy sitting on the front pew playing on the snare drum, and we had a Casio keyboard and the piano. So that was Jerry kind of burning up his last little bit of credibility to help me get in with the drums.
I remember that little snare drum, and it seems like to me he only played like during the chorus or something, just for real short period. And we all wondered, have we pushed the envelope too far?
That's
drums
right.
in the church.
We were wondering about it. So, but when we left there, and we did go to the Medallion Hotel, it was named at the time, we actually had a drum kit. Same drummer, Pete, was in the hotel, and so that helped a lot. And so we had this mix of choir, drum, rhythm section, and guitars, and then we had some horns in there. We had flutes or something, I don't remember. We had several people, so it was just kind of this amalgam, and then it changed just a little bit more when we got into the new place. We never did bring an organ back in, I don't think.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, I think we had
keyboards,
keyboard and pianos, and then the drums were at the side, and then somewhere over the time they moved to the middle, and the choir got less and less and became more of a praise team, and we started using
Got rid of the
upfront
robes
vocals.
at some point.
Yeah, we did. That was very practical. People were just too hot in the robes, and so yeah, lots of changes.
I remember part of that transition. The choir used to stay up the whole service, and then they got to where they would sing, and they would come down with the message,
yep.
and so the robes kind of became impractical at that point.
Yeah.
So little by little.
Yeah, that's right.
It's pretty cool. Well,
Lots of changes.
one of the really transformational things that happened in our church, well, I guess, was the early 2000s, 2003, 4, 5. In there, we decided to focus on reaching families and children and families. Actually, we started by trying to reach children. Very quickly realized that if you're going to reach the kids and really disciple them, then you got to involve the whole family.
Sure.
So we decided to start a ministry that was called Kid Stuff, and but to do that was quite an undertaking, and I remember that's something you took on, and really probably utilized every gift that you ever had in order to pull that off. Tell us a little bit about what it took to pull off Kid Stuff and all that went into that.
Well, it was like doing an Easter production, the old Easter productions, pretty much every week. I mean, we had a full script, full tech. In fact, we even wound up splitting our youth pastor's time at the time to be a tech director, because it was all hands on deck for that. I think, do you remember what we were running congregation-wise about that time? Probably 300 or so.
Maybe something like that.
So I remember at one point our organization had 130 people in it. So about half the church was in this one ministry doing kid stuff. But I still, looking back on that, am astounded at the church's flexibility to do that, because we went in and ripped out a choir loft and built a kids set up there in order to facilitate this family production. We adjusted the Sunday school hour so that it could take place during the Sunday school hour back then. And I just, from the churches I had been in, that would have just split most of them apart.
It really, the church, everyone bought into this idea that we need to try to reach the next generation for Christ, and how do we do this? And literally everything in the church changed. I mean, we changed the Wednesday nights to a rehearsal time. We changed the utilization of the facilities, staffing, budgeting, times, everything changed, and the church really bought into that. And as you said, we put this kids clubhouse basically on the front stage of the main auditorium, and then when that would be over with, we'd go put these ugly curtains up, and our church just embraced it and said, if that's what it takes to reach kids, then that's what we'll do. and you and your team, as you said, over 100 volunteers working every week to pull that off. And we did that for, what, 3, 4, 5, I don't remember.
It was a while.
And
It was a while.
and you know, and this is just my opinion, but I really believe it was because of that step of faith and that flexibility that our church had and that commitment to reaching children and their families for Christ. I really believe that the eyes of the Lord stopped on our church at that point and said, well, if you're going to do that, then I'm going to put you somewhere where there's some kids. Because at that time, the church was, we were in a good location, but it was a transitioning neighborhood and an aging neighborhood, didn't have as many children. And so many of the people in the community didn't even speak English anymore. Many of the public schools were like 90% Hispanic. We were trying to reach them, but we couldn't communicate, and we were not being very effective at reaching the community. And then one day in 2012, phone rang, and a church said, we want to buy your building. And as I've told the story many times, that was like the first domino that began a series of events that brought us to McKinney. And so we moved, and even one of your jobs was to move us. Chris organized the physical move from Farmers Branch up to the interim location here, right down the road on Stacy Road. And so we were there for 5 years, beginning in 2012. You were still our minister of music. And of course, you know, doing other roles along the ways too. Became our family ministry director, overseeing all of our children's areas and youth areas, and heading that up and trying to bring a cohesiveness to that strategy from, you know, bed babies all the way really through college. And so you did that for a while as well. And then I think it was in 2014, one day you came to me and you said, I got an idea, and I think I'd like to change my role. You'd been on the staff at like 20 years at that point, and you said, I've been doing the same thing for about 20 years, and I think I'd like to change what I'm doing. And I said, are you sure? Tell us a little bit about what happened there.
Well, honestly, that conversation got started. One day, Brett and I were talking, and I said, man, if you could just do anything in the world, what would you want to do? And he kind of nicely, he wasn't this forward with it, but basically said, I'd like your job as worship pastor. I said, okay. Well, but interestingly, that
he was
a youth pastor then, a student pastor. And of course, I'd never heard anybody going from worship pastor to student pastor. You talk to most people, that's a demotion in their minds. But anyway, that stuck with me, and the ball got rolling. And again, that's kind of the journey. You know, it's with the church, it's been unprecedented and unusual, and it's not according to the script. And this was true of that thing too. The first thing to make a transition, if I were going to become our student pastor and family pastor at the time, was I had to approve that with my daughter. And so I talked to Hannah about that, and first reaction was, no, absolutely not.
She was a teenager at the time.
She was in the youth group at the time. What would you think if Dad became your youth pastor? Horror and no. So, but anyway, about 2 weeks later, she came up, and as I remember, I think she put her hand on my shoulder, and she said something like, Dad, you know that youth pastor thing? She said, that'd be all right. And so I thought I'd talk to Dory about it, and came to you and chatted about it, and so we felt like it was the Lord. And I remember after we made that transition, I remember thinking, what have I done? I have blown my foot off here, you know, taking in this role. And I remember you telling me, you're not stuck, you know, I commend your step of faith. And all right. But I tell you what has shocked me, the kid stuff thing really helped me see that the church and parents can work in concert with one another, and should be, because really things have been pretty segmented. It's kind of the church and home, and those were, you know, the church educated, did the religious education, but I saw that didn't work. And so being in student ministry, I have been consumed really with a heart for students and for families and for working with parents. My heart breaks for our current generation of students. And God's given me such a heart. It has been such a joy to be able to work with them and invest with them. And I love the zeal and the passion that students can have. And my heart breaks for them because I also see them ravaged by false ideas and lies in our culture. And so it's been a amazing transition. I still get to lead. Brett does all the heavy lifting on the music now, and I get to do what I'm best at, and that's sing and lead from that perspective some. And so it's been an interesting
So in addition to
transition.
being our student pastor now, you also head up the small group ministries of the church.
Yep.
And also sort of coordinate a lot of the ministries that processing, a lot of the service ministries of the church. So kind of tell us about some of your other roles that you do for us.
Yeah, so I do lead our small groups and what I call the engagement pathway, so that people when they're visiting the church and then all the way through to assimilation, and I kind of have my hand on that. There's a lot of people that help in that process there. But one of my heart's passions really is community, and I began to experience that when I told you my family split up and some of those men came around me. Well, I didn't know what that was at the time. I just knew those were loving, healthy, growing, challenging relationships. And so that wasn't even a program of our church. It just was something that was happening sort of ancillary and side to the church. Well, when we came here, in fact, I remember before coming to Brookhaven and thinking through that Acts 2:42 passage where the church is meeting daily in one another's homes and they're living in this fellowship together and sharing needs, and thinking, I know that was a unique time in the church, but at the same time, I think God held some of that out for us as a picture for us to pursue. I think there's a little bit of heaven there. When we came to Brookhaven was trying to do that at the time. We'd just come through a big experiencing God, evaluation, and man, our hearts were just grabbed up, because I didn't even know churches did that. All I knew was churches did Sunday school and programs, and here we were trying to do these community groups together. So that's been a heart of mine all the way through, is to see people live in community. I believe with all of my heart the gospel is the solution to every problem the world has, and the church is the means for living out the gospel. And so it is a joy to be able to try to throw into these community groups and live in that and see people live out their gifts and be the body of Christ and be the hands and feet of Jesus. That's been a life passion for me. I love seeing people find out what they're good at and what they're gifted at. And the Bible says our job is to equip people for the work of the ministry. And I love to do that and try to provide a platform for people to come and do that, and then see a passion in them, ignite, and get busy serving the Lord. And my goal in life is to try to help people see all the resources they've got and bend and move every one of those resources to work in the kingdom, which again is one of our church values as well. To help people pursue their passion is
Right.
one of the things we say. And so man, that lights me up when I see people do that. And so it's a privilege to get to work in both of those roles, because I get to see that and have a front row seat to that a lot and be involved in it. So it's exciting.
Well, it is obviously being with a group of believers, smaller group of believers. There's no other way really to get connected in a church. You come to services, and even now we're not even meeting, but even when we were, people don't get to know each other in a service.
Sure.
They make some acquaintances, they recognize some faces, might pick up a name or two. But you really get involved in the church when you get involved with a smaller group of people, whether that be a Bible study group, a prayer group, or a service group, or whatever. So there's a number of folks that are part of our church that have not gotten connected. What would you say to those folks? What would be the pathway? How, if they wanted to get connected, how do they do that?
Well, there's a couple of different ways. Probably the easiest way is if they'll just go on our website and look at the groups that are listed there. And there are some that are organized by topic. There are some that are organized by age range and sort of stage of life. And then there's some that are just kind of a broad spectrum of people. And so looking there and finding out what they might be interested in, what piques their interest, especially now because of COVID, and most of our groups are meeting. They may be online, and the majority of them are, but they probably need to.
We've had some people join are groups
Oh yeah.
that had never come to the church before, right?
Yeah,
Online, yeah.
we definitely have through online. We've actually there's one group that we even started during this time that is growing and doing well. So those are still meeting. I tell people in our new members class that the life of the church really does happen in the small groups, and so it's the way to get connected. So right now, that's probably the best time,
Okay.
best way is to go.
And
go
if
through
that's
the
too
website.
complicated, they can just write the church website.
Absolutely.
Or
Write Rachel at brookhavenchurch.com or Chris at brookhavenchurch.com and say, hey, I'm interested in a small group, and here's kind of some of what I'm looking for, and I'd be glad to pair them with a small group leader, and they can have a conversation and figure out what they want to do with it. So
Very good.
people, I encourage them to give them a try. Our leaders understand that we're not threatened, we're not building our own kingdom, and so if somebody comes and they don't connect, then man, they can try another group until they find one that fits for them and what they think God's doing in their life. So,
Well, Chris, one of the things that you've been gifted by God to do is sort of to bring order out of chaos. And I'm gifted to create chaos, and Chris is gifted to bring order out of chaos. And you have been a real gift from God to this church, and you've been a real gift from God to me.
well,
I've
thank
learned an
you.
awful lot from you, and but one of the things you've been really helpful to do is you've been able to take so many of the different ministries of the church and bring process to it, to a strategy to it that fleshes out, that's got a sequence to it, and that everybody understands their role, and some follow through and follow up and some things like that. That none of which am I very good at, and God has given you to the church and to me especially to do that. And you've done a great job of that, and you continue to help us in those things. And
Well, thank you.
through the years, you've had your hand in almost every ministry of the church.
Just about.
I can't really think of one you haven't been in hardly. But not just that, special events. You were so instrumental in many of those big special events we used to do that were all
Sure.
hands on deck that
Oh,
I
yeah.
look back at now, and I'm too tired to do
I'm
that. I
telling
can't
you,
even
those were
imagine doing
crazy,
those things now.
Crazy, yes.
And but anyway, God has used you in a great way.
Well,
And,
thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
anything you'd like to say to the church, or anything else you'd like to communicate before we wrap this up?
Well, one thing to the church, how do you sum up half of your life, which is where I've spent my church here, in the church here, I've spent half of my life here. And so I don't know how you sum that up, but, I'm grateful because things have not always been smooth in our relationship here on the staff and things like that. We've had some rough spots there, and I appreciate very much our church is letting me have some freedom. You letting me have some freedom, and I look back on some of the conversations we had and said, "Man, I said that, and I'm still around." That's amazing, those kinds of things. But just the grace, and again, I think that's one of our church values is the grace. We try to straddle this line of grace and truth. I'm more on the truth side than I am on the grace side, but I gotta say, God has woven so much grace into my life, I think. A part of that is Dory. She has just helped me grow in that so much, but a big part of that's Brookhaven too, and learning to extend grace. And so I am deeply grateful to the church for that. I'm deeply grateful to the church because a lot of guys, and I know my kids have felt, just because of my role, they felt some pressure, but they haven't felt near the pressure that many of my peers in ministry, their families feel, just under a microscope. And the church hasn't done that for my kids. The church has recognized that I'm the associate pastor, and there are qualifications that come with the family, no doubt about that. Timothy talks about those. But they haven't felt the pressure to have to live up to these high standards and under scrutiny, and people have not been mean to them. It's been a great place to raise my kids and my family, and so I'm grateful for those things. And just the partnership with Brookhaven, I feel indebted. Honestly, the privilege has been mine, and so I'm grateful to have been here.
Well, for 25 years you've been here. And
August 1st, I think it will be 25
years.
That's
and
unbelievable.
And really, half your life, as you said, and
Yeah.
really almost all of your adult life.
A little more than half, because I'm not quite 50 yet. So let's
Yeah,
just
that's
keep
right,
that
a little
straight.
over there.
That's right.
And so really almost all of your adult life.
Yeah.
And when you think about that, at least we don't know what the future holds or how long the Lord's going to tarry before he returns or how long he'll leave any of us here in this world. But
Yeah.
when you think about that when God was creating you and molding and shaping your life and gifting you and calling you, he was doing that for Brookhaven Church. You were being given to us as a gift. And you've been here for 25 years, and that's pretty astounding. Most ministers, as you know, they don't stay and invest their life in one place, and many move around almost like the military. And you've stayed, and you've plugged your life in, and we've been a part of your life since your 1 year of marriage,
Yeah.
and your God giving your children, and all of the developments of your life. And it's been a joy and a privilege to partner with you. And since this is your 25th anniversary coming up, obviously we would normally like to have some big reception or something, but the church can't get together right now, so we can't do that. But I didn't want this time to pass without recognizing that this is your 25th anniversary. So I have a
Okay.
gift for you from the church.
What?
And so we have just a gift of love for you and Dory and your family of $2,500.
Oh, my
That is just
goodness.
in honor and a thank you, just to say we love you and we appreciate
Wow.
what you have meant to us through the years.
Man, I am shocked by that.
Well-
Surprised. Wow. Thank you, brother. I
Well,
appreciate
thank
that
you for
very
taking the
much.
time to share with us today. I hope that the church family has gotten an opportunity to know you a little bit better,
Wow.
know your history and where you've come from, and what a gift you are to us today. So
Well,
God bless
thank
you,
you.
brother, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Glenn. It's been my privilege.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that, getting to know Chris Barker a little bit better. And Chris has just been such a blessing to my life and a blessing to this church family. And so we praise God for the 25 years of faithful labor and service. He's had a huge impact on our church and on the kingdom of God. Well, before we go today, I wanted to just talk to you about two things. One is every day, Monday through Friday, I send out a 2-minute video that's like a devotional. And it's just to help you start your day focusing on the truth of God, rather than starting the day focusing on all the events of the world that can bring fear and doubt and frustration and anger and all the things that we all encounter. And so just starting our day, setting our minds on God's truth. Those 2-minute videos of encouragement have been so well received. And so many of you have, when you receive the videos, you send them to other people. And it has been one of the greatest outreach opportunities that maybe our church has ever done. And so I want to really encourage all of you to be intentional about sharing those videos with other people. We've now, I think, probably recorded over 85 daily videos. It's been a while since I've counted. And so I hope that you will take advantage of what we're doing on an almost daily basis to help you minister to your family, your neighbors, your friends, your coworkers. And so if you're not getting the videos and you'd like to, you can do that by just writing our church administrative assistant. Just write Rachel@brookhavenchurch.com and just say, I would like to be on the list for the 2-minute videos, or just something like that. And what you'll do is you will receive an email and a text message, and every day giving you a link where you can just click the link and immediately watch just 2 minutes to help you start your day off. Then you can just forward it right from your email address or your smartphone, and just forward it to somebody else that you think it might be a blessing to. So let's minister and let's spread the word, and let's keep the kingdom going forward by using this tool that God's given us through our technology. Now, I wanted to close by just giving you an update on where we are on meeting together in person again. We are going to next week definitely be meeting online like this again. But then between now and then, I'm going to be meeting this week with leaders of our church, the executive team, talking to our staff. We're going to be talking about where are we in this process of getting back together, and also something that you could help us do. If you remember, weeks and weeks ago, we sent out a church survey, and hundreds of you responded, and that let us know how you were feeling and what you were thinking, and we cherish your input. Some of you have written to me this last week. Some of you have called me, and I want you to know I really do appreciate your input. I want to know how you feel. And so we're going to be sending a survey out again this week. I need an updated understanding of how you're feeling as you try to evaluate and interpret all the conflicting data that you're getting, just like we get from medical professionals, from our government officials. Everybody's doing the best they can, trying to decipher what is often conflicting information that comes out every day. And so we're all doing the best we can to make wise decisions. And I just want to just let you know that I'm not a medical professional. I don't know any more about the medical science behind this COVID-19. I don't know any more about it than you do. In fact, some of you know far more than I do. All I can do is depend upon the data that I'm reading and that I'm hearing from, just like you do. And I know that you are struggling with trying to figure out, well, what is really the truth? Well, so do I, and so is the staff and the church leadership. So you can help us by doing a couple of things. I really ask that you pray that God will give us wisdom and that God will give us leadership by His Spirit. That is incredibly important, because though I don't really know what the real truth is, God does. And God can give us leadership. So please pray for that. Second of all, I just urge you to strive together for the unity of the church. Because the truth is that there are many different opinions about this virus and how deadly it is and how dangerous it is. And I don't know what the truth is. There are some that really are afraid and fearful for their family's safety, and they feel very passionate about this, of course. And then there are others who really don't think there's much risk there for whatever reason, and they're willing to take greater personal risk, and they feel passionate about it. And then there are others who think that this is an issue of religious liberty, and that they fear our religious liberties are being taken away, and they feel passionate about it. And so I just want to urge you that there are passionate, strong feelings and opinions on every side of this issue. And so it's very important, as Romans chapter 14 tells us, that we don't judge one another in these various opinions that our church family might have. Don't judge each other. In fact, let's give each other the benefit of the doubt. Let's believe that everyone is trying to do what they believe is right and is best for their family, their lives, and the church and the kingdom of God. So in these disputable matters, the Bible says, don't judge one another, but put each other's interest ahead of our own. And then it says very specifically, what you believe about these things, keep between yourself and God. I believe that it's important that you and I don't argue about these things, that we don't express and try to gather other people to believe what we believe. You can certainly make your information and your opinions known to us. We want that. But at the same time, I urge you to do that which is best for the unity of the church. Because in the long run, whether we are meeting together again in person 2 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now, whenever it might be, that's not going to matter much in the long run. What will matter far more is, did we stay unified? Did we seek the Lord together? Did we love each other? Did we trust each other? And did we continue to build one another up? That's the critical, most important thing for us today. Now this week, I'm going to be emailing to you, sending to you a link to a survey. I want your input. Please do it, and do it quickly, because I hope by the end of the week to gather up our church leaders, and we will have heard from you and know a lot better where you stand, and that will help us to know, have greater wisdom than we do right now. So thank you so much, church. You're just doing a great job during this unusual time in the history of the world. And do not forget this. I believe that this is not a setback. I believe that what God is going to bring forth from this unusual time may be the greatest expansion of the ministry of Christ in the history of the church. What an amazing thing that would be if right before our Lord Jesus returns, there was this amazing explosion of the expansion of the kingdom, and then Christ Jesus our Lord returns. And so I think that may be what's going on here. So let's stay together, let's pray, let's keep looking and trusting that God is going to bring something extraordinarily good out of this difficult situation. I love you. We will talk to you soon.